All right, everyone. I am excited to welcome back to the show, friend of the show, Pat Jankiewicz. He's the author of many books. He's a deep diver. We dove deep into the Incredible Hulk TV show in episode 175. He's also written the companion book for Buck Rogers, The Greatest American Hero. And the reason we're here together today is to talk about his Jaws companion, just when you thought it was safe to listen to podcasts again. Pat Jankiewicz is here as my guest, and we're going to talk Jaws celebrating its 50th anniversary. 50 years.
Holy smokes. Yeah. What Quentin Tarantino very correctly calls the greatest American movie ever made.
Jaws is one of those movies where you can rewatch it over and over again, and it holds up as if it was made last week.
What's amazing is it was made in the middle of the 70s, the worst time for clothes, the cheesiest time for music, and the movie doesn't date because they're all wearing swimsuits.
Right, because it's on
Martha's Vineyard.
Because it's filmed on Martha's Vineyard, so they're all wearing their Martha Vineyard wear, which probably is the same now as it was then. And
yeah, and Hooper is basically dressed like a funky scientist in the island he's got the cap, he's got nothing except for like a one regrettable shot when he is looking for the shark and he's wearing like those 70s granny glasses on Richard Dreyfuss. Clint is dressed like an old seaman. Brody is dressed in a sheriff's uniform. The movie does not date. It's amazing. They were smart enough not to make you watch any movie from the 60s, 70s, or 80s, and they're drowning in the era. Jaws is iconic because, like, timeless.
Yes, and it doesn't hurt that they were at sea the whole time, so they didn't use phones, which is usually the indicator of the time frame you're in.
Yeah, I mean, he has two phones in the very beginning when they notify him of the victim's body on the beach. But again, that's pretty much. I think there's like two scenes where you can tell it's a rotary phone, but that's it.
What do you know about the book? Peter Benchley's book that inspired the movie comes out in 1974, inspired by real shark attacks. So it's a story based around actual happenings, and it just becomes an instant bestseller itself. Do you know anything about like
everything? What do you want to know?
I'm going to just talk about like how did they get wind? How did they determine to acquire the rights? Like, because they moved pretty fast to make this a movie.
Yeah. So Benchley had been writing for like National Geographic and Newsweek and all that. And Congdon, this book editor, took him out to lunch. He took him to a second tier club, not where he would take like Tom Wolfe or somebody. And he proposed him giving him a book, and they hashed out ideas, and nothing was going over. And Congdon is like kind of pushing him, trying to find if there's any commercial ideas because he liked a couple of his articles. So Benchley then pitches him this book about a shark that promotes a crisis of conscience in the community over whether or not, it's basically Moby Dick meets Enemy of the People. He responds to that, and Benchley sends him like the first chapter. And he said, because Benchley's style, the family style of the Benchleys, like Nathaniel Benchley, the Russians are coming, was a lot of jokes. And he said, so there's a lot of jokes. Brody and everyone are yucking it up. But he said the opening attack on the girl was so scary. He took a blue pencil through the rest of the book and wrote through the rest of the chapter and wrote no jokes. But the opening with the naked drunk girl going swimming, attracting the shark's attention, all that really was great. And so he wanted it more serious. Jaws is one of those rare instances where the movie is actually better than the book. Give Benchley credit for the core concept, the shark attacking a beach community. But Hooper in the novel is sleeping with Brody's wife. Brody is kind of upset and balding and troubled. And Quint is this old bald guy who just hates sharks. They never say why. So the movie gave Quint this amazing backstory. I mean, the movie works. It's a perfect American movie. It's three guys coming from three economic stratas together to save a community. Quint is blue collar, living in the shack, you know what I mean, hunting sharks. Brody is middle class. He's the police chief, but even his wife doesn't really respect him. In the book, even in the movie, they keep changing. Instead of her stuffing Hooper, they keep Brody's weaknesses. If you watch the first half of the movie, Brody's clumsy. He knocks over all the painting supplies. Everything in the movie is stuff he's meant to do. Don't play on those swings. I haven't fixed them yet. Everything Brody is doing in the movie, he means to do, but hasn't done. And then Hooper is rich, but he puts himself in danger trying to help save this community. So these three guys join from different stages. They're different people. And at the end of the movie, it's basically a team effort. This is a 50-year-old spoiler alert. But when Brody is the last survivor, basically, Quint is dead and Hooper has fled, he's using Quint's gun as he's clinging to the gin pole as it's sinking. He uses Quint's gun and Hooper's air tank. So even at the very ending, when it's him alone, it's still a team effort. That's brilliant.
Yeah. In the book, Hooper dies, right?
Mm-hmm. Hooper dies in the shark cage. He's bitten in half. In the book, give Benchley credit to this, by the way. In the book, the shark is breaching all the time. A shark will jump. A shark will, you know this from South Africa, and Benchley knew this from going on researching sharks and everything. They breach, even though they're thousands of pounds. These things leap into the air. So yeah, he bites Hooper in half, and when he breaches out of the water, Brody shoots his corpse in the neck while trying to kill the shark. Quint's death in the book is kind of a botch. Quint dies exactly like Captain Ahab dies in Melville's Moby Dick. He gets his leg tangled and drowns, and so he's forever attached to the shark. At the end of the book, when Brody looks in the water before grabbing the part of the chair and swimming for shore, he sees the shark and Quint's bodies dangling in the twilight water. Not really it's Moby Dick. It's not really a cool ending. The whole thing is you got to go mano a mano. They're there to kill the shark. They're either going to kill the shark or the shark is going to kill them. And I think the movie ending is perfect. Once Quint dies, all bets are off because Brody is the only one who doesn't know the environment. Brody's afraid of the water. Brody doesn't know this or that. All the experts are fled or gone. And it's Brody alone. And that's the most terrifying part of the movie. When the shark comes through the window, he suddenly realizes, when he goes in, his protection for the second half of the movie has been the boat. So when the boat is finally sunk and the shark has driven off the two experts, when it comes through that window at him, it's the most terrifying scene in the movie because now there's nothing protecting him. There's nothing shielding him. The experts shield him. Quint's boat shields him. At the end of the movie, it's him alone. It's terrifying.
Yes. And then I always thought about at the end of the movie, after he kills Jaws, and then Hooper reappears, right? And they kind of swim back together.
Yeah.
There's no way anyone who's ever been in a pool after seeing the movie Jaws knows a shark is about to eat them in that pool, right?
Yeah.
There's no way they swam that far and didn't have a panic attack the entire time. Like there was another shark or a minnow bumps up against her at knee. It's all when I watch that, that's all I think about. Is like, that must have been the most torturous swim home ever.
The movie plays fair. They made sure, Spielberg makes sure, I think Joe Alves shot that footage, but he makes sure you see Brody and Hooper hit the beach at the very end of the credits. They actually make it to shore because before the movie goes to the black credits, they make sure you see the two heroes reach shore, which is really impressive.
How did they come to pick Spielberg? Because now we go like, oh, Steven Spielberg, but he wasn't Steven Spielberg back then.
Yeah, he did not get he says he stole the script from Zanuck and Brown's office, but there was also this really terrible meeting. The original director was a guy named Dick Richard, and Dick Richards did the original Heat. If you've seen the Heat in the 80s with Burt Reynolds, it's based on a great book, I think by William Goldman. The book is fantastic. The movie's not so good. And in fact, that movie's famous because Burt Reynolds punched Dick Richards. So Dick Richards had the script, had the gig on Jaws. There was a big meet and greet. Linda Harrison, who was married to Nova from Planet of the Apes, she was up for the role of Ellen Brody in Jaws. She was, of course, married to Zanuck at the time. They did this meeting at the 21 Club, and Dick Richards apparently was a little drunk. The meeting with Benchley, Zanuck and Brown are introducing Dick Richards to Benchley, and they're trying to make sure Benchley's worried. This book put him on the map. He can't afford the movie to be terrible. Dick Richards kept referring to the shark as a whale, and every time he called the shark a whale, this is in David Brown's book, Let Me Entertain You. Every time he called the shark a whale, they would correct him. But David Brown and Richard Zanuck both noticed angrier and angrier Benchley was getting. He basically had the gig and lost it. Once he lost Jaws, that's when Spielberg swept in. And what's amazing is he made it, basically the narrative drive of the movie is dual. And one of the interesting things about the movie, I'd interviewed the late Richard Matheson in my book, who wrote I Am Legend, all the classic Twilight Zones. And he said Spielberg called him and offered him the job writing Jaws. And when he told him what he wanted to do, he told Spielberg, you just want to make Duel with a fish. So he didn't do it. And of course, later on, he wound up doing Jaws 3D, which was nowhere near Jaws in terms of effectiveness. The same Richard Matheson had told me he got thrown out, also at Universal, he got thrown out of a meeting with Alfred Hitchcock. When Alfred Hitchcock liked his books and liked his Twilight Zones, wanted to talk to him about doing The Birds. And he said his first line in the meeting with Hitchcock was, he passes all these bird trainers and everything coming into Hitchcock's office. And so Hitchcock asked Matheson, what would you like to do? And he goes, I would never show the birds. I think Hitchcock was too far gone by then. They had all the bird trainers and everything else.
Wait, so Richard Matheson wrote Jaws 3D?
Yes, he did. His draft is better than the film they made. Originally, Matheson's very first idea, basically, he was looking to do something more to the story that inspired Jaws, where it was a shark in the creek kind of thing, was his original idea for it. And then he said once they went 3D, they never went back,
3D was pretty hot at the time.
Problem with the 3D, though, all these cheap jack movies had beaten it out. There were terrible movies like Coming at Ya. There was The Summer of Jaws 3D, Metal Storm, which was horrible, The Destruction of Jared Sin, Space Hunter, all these mediocre to terrible 3D movies. So by the time Jaws 3D came with great 3D, a lot of its effectiveness was diluted. He told me the least helpful note of writing Jaws 3D for him was a Universal executive asked Matheson, could you make it the shark from the ending of Jaws 2? The one with the burned out eye and everything. And he did not think that was very helpful.
No. Originally, I think I had read that the original Jaws sequel was going to be potentially about, or what Spielberg wanted to do was about the USS Indianapolis. And
Spielberg, he literally told them if they would wait so he could finish Close Encounters, he would have directed it. He didn't really want to do Jaws 2, but Spielberg loves World War II. And, he was always had a natural fascination for it because obviously his father fought in it and everything else. He had an interest in World War II. World War II runs through all his movies. I mean, you see references to it in Close Encounters, The Pilots That Are Returned. It's in Jaws, of course, 1941. Of course, Raiders of the Lost Ark. There was always this, he was interested, even his short films as a kid were like World War II movies because that's what he grew up on. Yeah, he wanted to do Quinn's story on the Indianapolis. And can you imagine how terrifying that would have been?
Yeah, I always thought after hearing that the way to go with Jaws, where I always thought it would still be something that they still make Jaws movies, would be as if they had just made great shark movies.
Right.
Versus trying to figure out why the Brodies are always being attacked by sharks.
Yeah.
I mean,
again, Matheson did not want the Brodies in Jaws 3D. That was kind of forced on him. But yeah, if you look at like Revenge of the Creature, which Jaws 3D is an uncredited remake of, they just have new people, same creature. That's a brilliant idea. Just put the shark somewhere else and everybody has to figure out how to handle it. You know what I mean? He keeps coming back to the same place, like the Universal Studios tour. John Putch, who's an acclaimed TV director now, he's the younger brother. He's Sean Brody in Jaws 3D. He says there's no way Jaws the Revenge is the worst Jaws movie. He said Jaws 3D is the worst. We go to SeaWorld to fight a shark, which is kind of hilarious.
Well, I think if you take Jaws 3D and you remove the Brodies from it, then it's a terrifying movie, right? It's like it's safe area where somehow a shark got in, no different than the shark in the creek. But it's like what kind of makes it unrealistic is the fact that it's the Brodies somewhere else and a shark, same kind of shark, finds him again.
Yeah, it's to me, and by the way, when you look at that to me is the most franchise damaging. Brody has killed 2 great whites. By the end of the series, his son has killed 2 great whites. His wife helped kill 1 great white. I mean, it's ridiculous, you know.
Yeah. There's only so many gray whites, the Brodies, you know. But I think but had they done just great shark movies, that's something that could still be a franchise today. You know what I mean? A Jaws movie.
Yeah. You look at Chris Kentis's Open Water, which is a great shark movie. And he has a great nod. The 2 victims in the movie are named after Susan Backlini, who was Chrissy. I think her name is Susan Watkins, which is, he combined the actress's name with the character name. The male lead in the movie is named after the Kittner boy. You just do a nod like that and move on. There are so many great shark movies. Have you seen Dangerous Animals yet?
That looks really good. Looks freaky.
I haven't seen it yet, but friends who I trust have been raving it up. The great Cynthia Garris, this actress singer who recommended The Reef to me, which is a great Australian shark movie. She loved it, and I trust her implicitly. She's a huge shark movie aficionado.
I think Deep Blue Sea is one of my favorites.
There's so many good ones. I mean, The Reef is great. Deep Blue Sea is fantastic. The Shallows is fantastic.
There's definitely a horrible fear tied to it. And if you are on Great White Shark TikTok, you would be led to believe that there's a shark attack every 5 seconds. I actually looked it up. Do you know how many fatal shark attacks there are? Not attacks, fatal shark attacks there are a year, where it ends in a fatality.
Curious.
5 to 6. But unprovoked shark attacks, meaning like somebody gets bit or something, there's about 70 or 80 a year, about 40 or 50 of those in the US. And they say you're more likely to get struck by lightning than get bitten by a shark. And the global odds of being killed by a shark, which TikTok will lead you to believe otherwise, is 1 in 4 million.
Wow. I mean, I remember on a family vacation in Florida, I remember a 12-foot hammerhead came into the swimming area. And just to see that fin and know you're in the water, I was with my dad, I was with my Uncle Jerry and my big brother Tom. You know, those are my 3 heroes. And this fin goes around us and we were utterly helpless. I mean, I was like, 12, and it's like, oh my God, there is nothing you can do when it comes in. But if you leave him alone, 9 times out of 10, they'll leave you alone. It's when you go to areas like Stinson Beach, which is in Northern California. Stinson Beach has had some really horrific shark attacks. My brothers, my dad and I used to camp on a Villa Beach. And I remember we camped there one year and they told me there'll never be any marine wildlife here because we had an oil spill a couple of years ago and the fish will never come here again. A month after the next time we were there, we came a month after in 2004, a great white bit a woman in half. There was a woman who had this, it's in the devil's teeth. And if you read my book, there's a shark attack, no swimming sign. I took that to the Villa Beach right after the 2004 attack. This poor woman had this habit of swimming with the dolphins. Or no, she would swim with the sea lions, which I would not recommend. You know what I mean? Because the sharks go there for the sea lions. The Channel Islands, Catalina, and then you go further out to sea, divers call it Shark Park because that's where the sea lions hang out and that's where the sharks come to eat the sea lions. In Villa Beach, this poor woman would swim with them. When the sea lions saw the shark coming, they all split and it attacked her. I talked to people like the sunglasses lady on the beach. The stories were crazy and horrifying. You don't want to be, like you said, you don't want to be one of those 5 or 6 people,
Well, it's funny because I joke about the TikTok thing, but I watched one guy talking about a great white shark attack So, TikTok, that's all I get. It's like, it's funny. You think to yourself, it's like, you think of all the ways you can die, car crash, just whatever, natural causes, disease, whatever it is that we fear day to day. It's probably not in most people's top 10 eaten, I mean, it's like mind boggling to think about that.
But my argument is nobody forgets the poor bastard eaten by the shark. Lester Stillwell, who the Kittner boy is based on, the kid who got eaten in 1916 in Matawan Creek, he was like 9 or 11 years old. You'll never forget him. I mean, Benchley made him into Alex Kittner. It's the most horrific attack you've ever heard of. You'll never forget that guy. Anybody who has been mauled and killed by a shark, you know what I mean? I mean, I can name the surfers who've been eaten out here just because it's so, like you said, it's so unlikely.
Pat, I'd rather go silently and forgotten than.
Yeah. All
right.
Let me fall asleep in the snow, lost.
All right. Let's get back to the movie. All right. So casting. Any specific, was Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw, were they always destined? Were there other people almost?
No, a ton of people turned them down. The one guy, Carl Gottlieb, told me that the one guy Spielberg wanted the most was Sterling Hayden, Captain McCluskey from The Godfather. Stand him up straight and tall, the one who breaks Michael's jaw. Mm-hmm. He wanted him for Quint, and he wanted Lee Marvin for Quint, and there was like a long list of these guys. The amazing thing is Sterling Hayden turned him down. Lee Marvin basically told him he'd rather be fishing for real fish than pretending to fight a fake fish. Everybody who got it was like second or third, you know what I mean? After people passed, people didn't want to do it. Spielberg met Roy Scheider at a party, and Roy Scheider said, "Tell me about this movie you're doing." And he described Jaws to him. And that's when Roy Scheider said, "Yeah, I would love to do that movie." One of the more horrific elements that just came up, Roy Scheider had been cast by William Friedkin as Father Karras in The Exorcist. And then when he met Jason Miller and gave him the part, because he felt, Jason Miller, I couldn't think of anyone else as Father Karras. Scheider had that role until he saw a play with that Jason Miller was in. Can you imagine the horror of Scheider? Your second banana in The French Connection, and then you have the lead in The Exorcist, then you lose it, and it becomes one of the highest grossing movies of all time. I mean, can you imagine how terrible that must have been?
Horrible. And then boom, Jaws.
And then boom, Jaws, yeah. And because of Jaws, eventually that got him Sorcerer when Steve McQueen passed. And unfortunately, when he gets to be the lead for Friedkin, it becomes the biggest bomb of his or Friedkin's career. Scheider got it, and supposedly Spielberg's direction to him every day is, I have to, you can never show me a scene in the movie where you look like you're going to kill the shark. He wanted them insecure. And if you watch, it's a great performance. He's got the glasses on, and he's nervous, and he's clumsy. And then towards the end of the movie, when he's in the black turtleneck, and suddenly he becomes the man, he becomes a combination of Hooper and Quint. Because he's been around these two alpha males so long, Brody rises to the occasion. So it was always interesting casting for me, thought-wise, was both Sid Sheinberg and, the head of Universal Studios under Wasserman. Sid Sheinberg and Richard Zanuck both promised the part of Ellen Brody to their wives. When Spielberg heard that both of them wanted their wife in the same role, supposedly he just went, oy vey. He couldn't say or do anything because he was small. This is his first big movie, after Sugarland Express. And now the two men who control his future both promised the role to the wife. When Lew Wasserman heard the story, he looked at them and said, somebody is going to get a divorce out of this. And Linda Harrison said that turned out to be true. When Jaws became the highest grossing film of all time, of course, whatever pressures were on in her and Zanuck's relationship, the fact that he didn't have the power to get her into the movie must have really weighed heavy. They wrote a part for her in Jaws 2. She was supposed to be the woman doing the bite measurements on the dead killer whale. The bad blood between Zanuck and Sheinberg was so bad they wouldn't let Zanuck cast her in that either. So it, oof.
Wow.
So yeah, so the fact that half of the performances in the movie are local hires. Ben Gardner was a non-actor cast fisherman on the island. I mean, and the guy they used, Shaw used him for Quint. And so Shaw would walk around, the legendary man on the Kingsley. He would walk around Martha's Vineyard with him. And so a lot of his mannerisms as Quint came from him. So to thank him and reward him, they made him Ben Gardner. One of the most effective performances in the movie is Mrs. Kintner, when she's looking for her son and she slaps Brody and realized he knew and let her son die. That was a theater actress on the island, Leah Fierro, and she's incredible in it.
She's amazing. She's amazing.
She's incredibly amazing. I mean, for a local hire, for them to depend on that's the scene that propels Brody to overcome his fear and go to sea and save his community. Because the woman had kids his age. He feels personally responsible for destroying this woman's family. That's a local hire. Nowadays, if you were doing a movie, you would never entrust that on a local thing. You would bring some big Hollywood actress in for this amazing moving moment. They did not do that. It was all local hires. You know, the kids are local hires. And you could tell, even though Brody is supposed to be from New York, his kids have thick Massachusetts accents. And that's why this is one of my favorite Jaws facts. And I got this from the amazing June Foray, who was the voice of June was every cartoon you've ever heard of. She was Witch Hazel on Bugs Bunny. She was Rocky the Flying Squirrel on Bullwinkle. She was Natasha Fatale, also on Bullwinkle. But she did all these voices. She's Talkie Tina in the Twilight Zone. So if you watch the movie, the oldest son has a thick Boston accent. Hey, Ma, I got bit by a vampire. You know, when you were playing on those swings. I'm going to fix those swings. So what was happening is later in the movie, when he's got I would argue his biggest line, when he says the pond's for old ladies, which is the setup for the line where Brody says, "We'll do it for the old man, will you?" Spielberg brought in June Foray because he needed the audience to understand the line. And so June comes in and she goes, "The pond's for old ladies." That's June Foray. And he says, "Do it for the old man." So June Foray told me that when she did it, she was doing, at Spielberg's request, she was doing wild Talkie Tina lines in between when she was dubbing the line for him. And you don't know this, but Harry Shearer, Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, and a number of other characters, he's one of the ADR lines you hear in the town. You hear talking in different scenes.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You know, Jaws was one of the first movies with just amazing ADR. And if you listen, they're acting the hell out of it. I love when the shark eats the guy in the pond, and when the shark is when the shark is leaving, you hear somebody scream, "Get a gun! Somebody get a gun and kill that thing! Anybody got a gun?" It's great. The ADR in Jaws is fantastic. I mean, at the opening beach party, you hear somebody say, because the movie's full of mutilations, you hear somebody say he's an amputee. It's almost predicting what's going to happen later in the movie. And if they're doing ADR, they already know all that. And it's probably an in-joke.
Pat, what is ADR?
Oh, automatic dialogue replacement. When they're doing all the lines to get the movie, when they're doing all the lines to get the movie synced up for release, you know, because there's too much crowd noise on a real set. So when they're dubbing the final version of the movie for the crowd.
How much involvement did Peter Benchley have with the screenplay before they brought in Carl Gottlieb?
I've read his script, and Spielberg took his script. You can read his script. It might be online. The version I read was at the Margaret Herrick Library. It's a solid adaptation of the book. And Carl Gottlieb said when Spielberg handed him Benchley's draft, he wrote 2 words on the front for him, which was "eviscerate this." So Gottlieb never gets enough credit, by the way. Gottlieb made the characters a lot more likable. There were several drafts. John Milius, of course, wrote a couple of hot button scenes for the Quint's speech came from Milius, and Gottlieb and Milius have differences on the Indianapolis scene. I've talked to Milius. Milius said he wrote it, but the version that I've heard from Gottlieb and other people, is that it was also written by Howard Sackler, who didn't get screen credit, but Howard Sackler, who did the Pulitzer Prize-winning play The Great White Hope. He was a diver, and supposedly he brought in the Indianapolis scene. But Milius told me, and this also makes sense, it had been recently, the Indianapolis shark attack had been recently declassified. Milius told me he gave Spielberg the option of, there were two really serious shark attacks on soldiers in World War II. One was Guadalcanal and the other was the Indianapolis. And nobody knew about the Indianapolis, and it was just so perfect for the story.
That monologue is one of the best.
And I would also recommend, if you really want to get into the Jaws vibe, find a book by an author named Michael Capuzzo called Close to Shore. Close to Shore is about the shark attacks in 1916. It's the best book. You can see how it influenced Benchley for Jaws. The shark going into the creek in Matawan when no one was expecting it, that becomes the Kittner boy in the pond. And the big showdown with the shark in real life took place at Raritan Bay. And to this day, they're still arguing whether or not it was a bull shark or a great white. The bull shark argument seems to make more sense, but the shark that they killed at Raritan Bay was a great white. It had a human leg in its stomach, and that's the one. It was a young great white, and that's the one that there's a joke about, wait till the taxidermy man sees what I brought him. The guy who killed the shark in Raritan Bay, they believe, was the Matawan man-eater. That's the one that they taxidermied it, and they put it in a store window and charged people 50 cents to look at it. My friend Joseph lives in Matawan Creek, and he actually he doesn't live in Matawan Creek, but he lives by it. He got me these amazing pictures, which if you join, I have a Facebook page, Just When You Thought It Was Safe, a Jaws Companion. So if you go through that, you will see Joe's amazing pictures of Matawan Creek. They put a mural up. They put the shark's mouth over there's the tunnel that the shark entered when it ate the child the kid was floating on his back, and it came up and ate him. And then it went the wrong way. The shark was trying to get out of the creek. And originally they said, a saltwater creature wouldn't live that long. But then a pod of dolphins got lost there in, I think, 87 or 97. So they saw that it did the same turnaround that screwed up the Matawan man-eater. So even though bull sharks can live in salt water, this thing, they think, because the dolphins made it through when they found their way out, they think the shark could have been, a great white could have gotten caught in there for a certain amount of time. It wound up eating the Stillwell boy, and it went down the creek because it was like a horseshoe. And when around, it wound up biting the leg of another child about 2 miles downstream. And it got out of the creek, and it ate a man. It's, again, the 1916 shark attacks are so horrific. It ate a man, Stanley Fisher, who went in to save the body. He went to rescue Stillwell's body. And then when he found Stillwell underwater and started pulling him up, he thought the kid was trapped under what looked like a piling. It wasn't a piling, it was the shark, and it attacked him at the waist. Stanley was a tall guy. He was like 6'6". So he battled this thing for about 10 minutes, but it got him so bad at the hip and everything, it opened an artery. And in those days, you had to wait for a train to take you to a better hospital. There was no hospital at that part of New Jersey. So he bled out waiting for the train.
Wow, these are horrific inspirations for the book.
Oh, yeah. So Close to Shore is worth a look. There's 12 Days of Terror, the TV movie based on that one's really good. It's from the director of The Hidden, Jack Scheider. It's a good shark movie. It's written by Tommy Lee Wallace, who did a lot of John Carpenter's great sequels and stuff. So it's fun. It's Jack Scheider's direction is great. The shark attack on the Stillwell kid is really, really good. But nothing beats Jaws. I mean, it's the perfect movie.
Oh, yes, it is amazing. Speaking of it being the perfect movie, it seems that when you watch, and a lot of this has been told over and over again, like the shark never really worked and the budget doubled from it's like, and they're shooting on the water, which is horrible in itself and hard, very difficult to do. Like, it seems like there was a lot stacked against this movie just in general to ever actually be not abandoned and to actually be completed.
That was one of the big questions, because they fired John Hancock off of Jaws 2. And John Hancock and his wife Dorothy Tristan, they had a really great take on the material. I mean, if you find the script, which is online, and it was used for the Marvel adaptation of Jaws 2, Brody has PTSD, and the town is kind of sick of him and sick of sharks, and the town is going slowly bankrupt because of the events of Jaws. It would have made a great downer movie, but the Hancock, of course, ran into all the same problems and more. And the only Hancock shark footage, basically, that he had lunch with Spielberg, and he goes, Spielberg wasn't a demigod yet. He was just a guy who was seen as lucky because it was his first movie. Spielberg told Hancock the one thing he would do for the early part of the movie is he goes, you have seagulls, you'd have dog pilings, and you would have the shark entering Amity. You would show the shark swimming in the early morning hours. And Hancock used that, and that became the first Jaws 2 trailer, and arguably the best Jaws 2 trailer. Everything became more or less a happy accident. Bill Butler told me he and Steven Spielberg had worked for Universal. He said the rules at Universal were very, very simple. If you were a day late, the Black Tower, which was the scary, where all the executives were at that point in Universal, the Black Tower is there to live this day. Whenever you're outside, you'll see the Black Tower. That's what they called it. That's where you would get fired. That's where Wasserman was. That's where Scheinberg was. That's where Ned Tannen was, the screaming exec. And here's, okay, you want a fun Jaws fact? Ned Tannen, the angry exec Ned Tannen was used as the name of the bully in Back to the Future. And Lorraine, Leah Thompson, Lorraine is named after Lorraine Gary. And there's also a character named Sid in Back to the Future. All that was an homage to them in the Black Tower. What's interesting is that Bill Butler was sitting with Spielberg, and he said Spielberg was really nervous. And he said, what do you think? He goes, you have nothing to worry about. Spielberg goes, what do you mean? He goes, you know the rules as well as I do, Stephen. After a day at Universal, if a director went over a day, you got a warning. If you went over 2 days, there was another director sitting in your seat. Butler said they must like the footage because we're still here. And David Brown talks about in his book, the difference between Steven Spielberg and John Hancock is apparently Hancock wasn't getting the footage they wanted and needed. And the problem poor Hancock had is because the town was supposed to be economically destroyed in Jaws 2. None of the shop owners during the summer seasons were going out of business or paper over their signs like nobody was there. They couldn't do what he needed them to do.
Right, to create that atmosphere. Okay.
Right. So they were fighting him on the vibe he was going for. But I still argue the John Hancock Jaws 2 would have been a great sequel, better than the beat for beat remake they made.
Right. There was a whole, because I talked to Billy Van Zandt, and I think he was the only one that survived from the original Jaws 2 cast before they recast it.
A couple of them made it. I heard one of them was reportedly a mistress of Ned Tannen, and that's one of the reasons Hancock was on the firing line. That's, you know what I mean? I mean, that was one of the more interesting rumors about Jaws 2. The thing is, yeah, Ricky Schroeder was cast as the original Sean Brody in Jaws 2, and he lost his part. Chris Gilpin got it. Very nice kid. Unfortunately, a very nice man. Unfortunately, he passed away last year. His sister, Perry Gilpin, was Roz on Frasier.
Oh, okay.
Half the cast lost their parts when that happened.
Let's say changed the story. As Billy Van Zandt told me, I think his character was originally, he may have been Quint's kid or something like that. And
yeah, he was supposed to be the son of Quint coming to get his $3,000 from the original film, and he would team up with Brody's son, and then it just became Jaws 2 again. It became Jaws, Teen Jaws, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they didn't go that route. The worst part of sequels are the ones that they don't just defile themselves, they defile the original film. You know, Halloween 2, finding out Michael Myers is her brother just means Jamie Lee Curtis' character got all her friends killed. It doesn't bring anything to the party.
Yes. All right. So the movie's made. It gets released. The first movie to make $100 million at the box office. So it pretty much invented the blockbuster as we know it today.
Completely. Even merchandising, album sales, T-shirts, all of that. A little bit of toys, but mostly album. The John Williams album sells like crazy. You hear it all summer long. Made more money than any movie had made up to that point in history. Spielberg is suddenly, he's basically justified. Everything he does is now justified, which is very exciting. And he gets to do Close Encounters. And of course, you get a slew of ripoffs. I think the first one really out of the gate was Grizzly. I have a story on Grizzly coming up on Dread Central, the site, if you want to look at that. Grizzly made more than any of their Jaws ripoff. It made 40 million. And the reason for that is it's not a good movie. It's not Piranha, it's not Alligator, which are the gold standard of Jaws ripoffs. You know, both written by John Sayles. Piranha, of course, beautifully directed by Joe Dante. And Louis Teague, of course, did Alligator. But what Grizzly had, it was the first Jaws ripoff since Jaws. More importantly, it had this beautiful poster by Neil Adams. Neil Adams comes up with this conceptual poster where he does Jaws in reverse. If you've seen the poster, he puts the victim at the bottom and the bear at the top. It's a great poster. So I have the late Neil Adams on Dread Central talking about how he just reversed the Jaws poster and made 40 million. But yeah, for the next 3 years, everybody rips off Jaws, and then everyone belatedly hops in the Star Wars train.
I looked up the numbers. I'm assuming these are accurate, but it made 260 million in the U.S.
Yeah, at the end of its run.
Now this is 1975.
Yes.
It made 210 outside of the U.S., so about 410 million, which by today's standards, if somebody made 410 million, it'd be crazy good, right? Depending on their budget, I guess.
Oh yeah, on a $9 million budget, yes.
that would be the 410 million in 1975 is equivalent of 2.3 billion today.
And considering what they had and how it came off, Fidel Castro in Cuba referenced Jaws in his speech. This movie travels all over the world. It's in every language. And it has the same reaction. I mean, it frightens everybody. It has a huge impact. And so, yeah, I mean, made more money than any movie ever.
Won some Oscars.
Best editing, John Williams wins for best music. And Spielberg, sadly, wasn't even nominated.
Right. This would be the start of his shunning until he finally wins his Oscar. So, but the downside to the legacy, which Peter Benchley has talked about in the past, is that it caused a unnecessary fear of sharks, right? And killing of sharks as well.
Probably did a boom for shark charters and everything else, which is unfortunate, but it gave everybody a fascination of sharks as well. There's a lot of ichthyologists who got into their fields because of Jaws. A friend who told me she got into it specifically because Jaws freaked her out as a little girl. It eventually led to the creation of Shark Week and the Discovery Channel. And that led, once you had Shark Week and, conservation, Benchley felt a lot of guilt. He talks about that in his book, Shark Life. I mean, Jaws, I don't think ever hit #1 in the bestseller list, according to Benchley in the book, in hardback. It was held out of the top spot, he says, in Shark Life by the book Watership Down, which is talking about a depressing movie. If you want to see a bunch of cartoon rabbits die horribly. But when it went paperback and they used the book's poster for the movie, but they had the artist. I interviewed the artist as well. And they told him we want the shark 3 times bigger than he is in the book cover. So Roger Castle painted the shark even bigger on the cover of the movie poster.
Oh, I know. It's a big shark. I
didn't even talk about luck. He did Jaws, and then after that, he did the poster for The Empire Strikes Back.
Another great poster. So,
oh yeah.
So here we are, 50 years later. It's just amazing, right? I mean, we're talking about it, and it still is revered today as.
When I wrote my book, it was one of the 5 most often run movies on basic cable. It was like Top Gun, but it was one of the 5 most run movies on basic cable. And the fact that there are July 4th and Memorial Day marathons, a Jaws marathon, even though there's basically one good movie, the others. I mean, I went into the minutia of the others and the behind the scenes stories. You realize what a rabbit's foot Jaws caught the first time around. Having Spielberg, having Carl Gottlieb, having the amazing Bob Matty, Roy Arbogast shark, they had a talented team that went with everything. On the other ones, it was more, we need to fill the summer slot. We need a Jaws movie here. They did not capture, even on Jaws 2, Brody so clearly does not want to be there. Roy Scheider did not want to make that movie. And you can tell in his performance. I mean, he got so sunburned, deliberately he tanned and tanned and tanned so much. Jano Schwartz told me they couldn't color correct him. He did not want to be there. They wanted to kill him off at the beginning of Jaws: The Revenge. He did a movie called Night Game and something else just to make sure he was unavailable in case they wanted him for Jaws: The Revenge, which they did. They were originally going to kill Brody in the beginning of Jaws: The Revenge, and he did not want it. Even though they were dangling $1 million for 9 days, he said, no temptation offered by the devil will make me do another Jaws movie.
God bless him for saying no.
Yeah.
That would have been.
Who wanted to see Brody eaten by a shark, I ask you? Nobody.
Some movies, they just don't work. I enjoy Jaws too, don't get me wrong. And I can deal with
it's fun junk, but you have to admit, if you put up 2 TVs and watch them side by side, every beat is from Jaws. The dead water skier, the woman driving the ski boat coming up instead of Ben Gardner's head at exactly the same time, and everything else. You know, Jaws doesn't date. Jaws 2 is very, very dated. When you made it about 70s teenagers, their hair, their clothes, their style, it just dates the movie horribly.
Yes. I still enjoyed it. As a sequel, I still thought it was fine. I know it's not what you're saying. I know it's not what you're saying. Just 3D, I hold on to. I have an affinity towards it because I remember seeing it like in the movie.
If you saw it in 3D, it's a different movie in 3D. If you accept the movie, I actually prefer Jaws 3D to Jaws 2 because Jaws 2 is trying so hard to be Jaws. It doesn't work for me. I mean, you can tell Brody doesn't want to be there. There's some good shark attacks. The attack on Eddie, I think, is fantastic. The death of Mara, just touching. But, I mean, there's like 4 characters going into shock. There's some good shark stuff, but the shark looks crappy. He's got an underbite. He doesn't match the shark from the original film. Roy Arbogast told me you can see the smoke coming out of the shark's eyes before he catches fire in earlier scenes because he said Universal wouldn't spring for the cylinders they used for Jaws on the eyes of the shark in Jaws. So yeah, no, I think Jaws 2 has the best catchphrase of a sequel. I use it in my book. And Jaws 2, the reason Jaws 2 exists, in my opinion, Jano Schwartz was told by the head of production that they owed him a favor. And to bring it all full circle, he used that favor by taking the best script he ever read, Richard Matheson's Somewhere in Time, shot in Michigan, shot in the Mackinac Island in Michigan. He used his crowd from Jaws 2 to get Somewhere in Time made. And I think Somewhere in Time is the movie we all remember Jano Schwartz for more than Supergirl, than Jaws 2. Jano wanted to do a love story, and he did a love story. And the fact that elements of Somewhere in Time found themselves in Titanic and 1,000 other movies shows that influence. And Jano made it clear that he was doing Jaws 2 to help them out. And remember, it was a nice revenge for Jano. Jano did a movie called Bug that opened on Wednesday, June 18th, 1975. On June 20th, that Friday, is when Jaws opened 50 years ago and, of course, crushed Bug. So letting Jano have the 10th highest grossing movie of the 1970s was kind of a nice reward for what happened to him on the earlier film.
Yes, and Somewhere in Time is a classic, and you can still go, if you go to Mackinac Island, to some of the places where they shot certain scenes. As a
kid, my brother Don, my mom, and I were in the Renaissance Center and ran into Christopher Reeve. He was very nice.
Yeah, Christopher Reeve, Jane Seymour. I think people that love that movie. It's very revered, very revered. Pat, I can't believe it took this long to get you back on the show, but I'm glad you're here. I'm
honored, good sir. Thank you.
Let's pitch the book one more time. A Jaws Companion. Just when you thought it, it's just when you thought it was safe. A Jaws Companion. So I was reading it backwards there. I was reading it Grizzly, top down, not.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
If you watch Dread Central for my Neil Adams piece where he talks about knocking out the Grizzly poster in 2 days.
We will do. I met Neil Adams at a Comic-Con, obviously before.
Did you like him? He's a very nice man.
A very nice man. He drew Superman versus Muhammad Ali.
He did. He helped plot it too. His son Joel is a good friend, and it's like when you met Neil Adams, one of the things about him what he never gets credit for. He used his fame at the risk of getting blackballed. He used his fame at Marvel and DC to help comic book creators who've been classically screwed. He's the one who helped Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the creators of Superman, get their pension from DC Comics, get their credit on Superman the movie. And even before, not too long before poor Neil died, he made sure Marvel kicked in money to help Dave Cockrum, who co-created the new X-Men, because he got no money out of it. It would be like Todd McFarlane when, getting money for Jack Kirby. There was nothing in it for Neil. Neil had kids to feed, but he wanted to make sure these two guys. He said that he told me it was the right thing to do. They created this industry and they're being screwed. And he goes, we have a chance to stop that in their lifetime. And I thought, wow, how amazingly commendable.
That is amazing. I love that. You know what else I love? Your book, Just When I Thought It Was Safe, a Jaws Companion, available on Amazon and I'm sure everywhere else. You can get
You made my day, Jeff. Thank you so much. I never get in the way of commerce.
Pat, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thanks for talking Jaws.
The pleasure was mine, good sir. Have a good day.
Have a good day.